sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, so let's get right into it. This week's deep dive is going to be about some pretty big shakeups happening over at MSNBC, and we've been seeing these articles pop up all over the place about big names leaving and Joy Reid, Lester Holt, longtime folks.
Yeah.
And so we've got your stack of notes and articles right here, and it looks like there's a lot to sort through. So
yeah.
What stood out to you as the most surprising thing?
Well, I think what's really interesting is how all these departures seem to be pointing to like a bigger shift in TV news. And, that's not just MSNBC. It seems like there's kind of a ripple effect across the whole industry.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're seeing sort of the end of an era. And
yeah.
I mean, Joy Reid leaving the Readout felt really sudden.
Yeah.
She just won an NAACP Image Award in 2025, and then suddenly she's gone.
What did you make of her post on social media right before the announcement? Any hints about what might have been happening behind the scenes? It is interesting that she decided to address the speculation directly. Her statement thanking the Readout team and calling them family, it almost sounds like a farewell letter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe this wasn't so much her choice and more a network decision.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And then just hours later, Lester Holt leaving NBC Nightly News after more than a decade there.
Right.
That just adds another layer to this whole shakeup.
Absolutely. He's been such a constant presence on evening news for so long, It's hard to imagine nightly news without him at this point. And it kind of makes you wonder if, his statement about wanting to focus on other projects is maybe just a polite way of saying that he was pushed out to make room for someone new.
Interesting take. Do you think maybe declining viewership is putting pressure on these networks to make these big changes?
I think it's definitely a factor, With streaming services and online news becoming more popular, traditional TV news is having a hard time staying relevant. They need to find ways to attract a younger audience, and shaking things up with some fresh faces might be part of that strategy.
It's like hitting the reset button, hoping to grab the attention of viewers who've moved on to other platforms.
Right, exactly. And it's not just about new faces either. The cancellation of those 3 weekend shows, Aman Mohyeldin Reports, the Katie Fang Show, and the Sunday Show with Jonathan Capehart,
right,
that suggests maybe a shift in priorities, too.
That's right. And it looks like MSNBC is creating a new show called The Weekend, with Mohyeldin and Capehart hosting the morning and evening slots. So consolidating those weekend programs, what do you think prompted this move? Could it be a cost-saving thing, or is there more to it?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of both. Cutting 3 separate shows definitely saves money, but it also lets them build a more unified weekend schedule with some familiar faces.
And it looks like they're not letting go of the talent entirely. Katie Fang is moving to legal correspondent.
Exactly. They're kind of shuffling the deck, so to speak, finding new spots for these hosts within the network. It's smart to hold on to experienced journalists while also giving the impression of change and, a fresh start.
So they're cutting costs, streamlining the weekend, and promoting from within. But what about that 7 p.m. slot that the Readout had? What are they going to do with that?
Now, this is where it gets interesting. Instead of replacing Joy Reid with just one person, they're going with an ensemble show featuring Simone Sanders Townsend, Michael Steele, and Alicia Menendez.
Wow. An ensemble show at 7 p.m. That's a bold move. Do you think it's going to work?
It's a gamble for sure, but it could also be a game changer.
How so?
Well, think about it. By bringing together 3 distinct personalities with different backgrounds and perspectives, they're creating a space for a wider range of viewpoints and potentially more dynamic conversations.
Yeah, it's like a panel discussion right there in your living room.
Yeah.
Will viewers be into this format, or will they miss the traditional single-host approach?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. It all comes down to the chemistry between the hosts and how well it's executed. If they can gel together and create something compelling, it could be a huge success. But if they clash or if it feels disjointed, it could backfire.
It's like putting a band together.
Exactly.
You need the right mix of personalities and talent to make it work.
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
What do you think this new format could mean for the future of cable news in general?
It's an interesting experiment, for sure. If it's a success, we might see other networks trying similar things.
Yeah.
It could signal a trend towards more collaborative and diverse news programming.
And that brings us to the bigger picture. These shakeups at MSNBC seem to be part of a much broader trend of upheaval in the TV news industry as a whole.
Absolutely. You've got Chuck Todd suddenly leaving NBC News and Jim Acosta leaving CNN.
Right.
These high-profile exits are happening everywhere.
It feels like the entire industry is in this state of change. trying to figure out how to adapt to a media landscape that's changing so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think these changes are ultimately a good thing or a bad thing for TV news?
It's hard to say for sure. There are definitely risks involved in shaking things up so dramatically, you know. You could alienate longtime viewers, which could further shrink an already declining audience.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, maybe these changes are necessary to breathe some new life into the industry and attract new viewers.
Maybe. But it's not just about attracting new viewers. It's also about adapting to the changing ways people get their news.
Right.
With so many options available online and through social media, TV news needs to find ways to stay relevant and offer something unique.
This is getting really interesting.
Yeah.
We've talked about Joy Reid's cryptic exit and Lester Holt moving on to other projects, the weekend show cancellations, and that bold decision to launch a new ensemble show.
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think we need to circle back to Joy Reid's departure and dig a little deeper into what might have led to her exit. Remember that statement she made thanking her readout team?
Yeah.
I think it's worth taking another look at that, see if we can read between the lines a bit.
Absolutely. Let's unpack that statement and see if we can glean any more insights into what was happening behind the scenes. That statement from Joy Reid thanking the readout team, it really stood out to me because on the surface, it just seemed like a standard thank you to her viewers.
Yeah.
But when you really look at it, it feels like there's something more there, especially that part where she calls the team her family.
Right.
Yeah.
It did feel a bit like a coded message,
Yeah.
especially coming right after Lester Holt announced he was leaving.
Right.
It makes you wonder if it really was her decision or if something else was going on.
Yeah. The timing of it so soon after Lester Holt's announcement and the way her statement was worded, it does suggest that maybe this wasn't entirely her choice.
Yeah.
Maybe there were disagreements behind the scenes about where the show was going, or maybe she was even offered a different position within the network that she turned down.
That's a really interesting thought. And if that's true, maybe MSNBC is trying to shift away from those deep dive interviews and analysis and move towards a more personality-driven, opinion-based format.
That's definitely a possibility, and if that's the case, it would be in line with what we're seeing across the industry. Look at the popularity of shows like The Five on Fox News and CNN Tonight with Don Lemon. They're all about opinion and debate rather than straight news reporting.
It's almost like the news has become entertainment.
Yeah.
And viewers are tuning in as much for the personalities and the drama as they are for the actual events.
Right.
Do you think this shift towards opinion-based programming could be turning off viewers who are looking for unbiased reporting?
I think it's a valid concern. You know, opinion shows can be entertaining and they can make you think, but it's really important for viewers to be able to tell the difference between factual reporting and someone's personal commentary.
Right.
The danger is that if those lines become too blurred, it can erode trust in journalism as a whole.
That's a really important point. We need to be critical consumers of news and information and not just accept everything we see and hear.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about this new ensemble show that's going to replace the readout. You said earlier that it could be a game changer. What are some of the potential benefits and risks of this format?
Well, I think the biggest potential benefit is that it gives you the chance to present a wider range of perspectives on an issue.
Yeah.
Having three hosts with different backgrounds and viewpoints could lead to more dynamic conversations and maybe even more nuanced analysis.
Yeah, it's like having a panel of experts right there in your living room debating the issues and challenging each other's assumptions.
Exactly. And it could also attract a more diverse audience. By showcasing voices that haven't always been represented in cable news, MSNBC could appeal to viewers who are looking for something different from the usual lineup of white male anchors.
That's a good point.
Right.
That sounds promising. But you also mentioned there are some risks. What are some of the potential downsides of this ensemble format?
The biggest risk is that it could just turn into chaos.
Yeah.
If the hosts don't have good chemistry or if they're constantly talking over each other, it could be a turnoff for viewers.
It's true. It's kind of like forming a band.
Right.
You need the right mix of personalities and a shared vision to create something that works. If the band members are always clashing or trying to outshine each other, the music's going to suffer.
That's a great analogy, and it applies perfectly to this ensemble news show. The success of this format is going to depend a lot on how well these three hosts can work together and create a cohesive and engaging program.
So it's high risk, high reward. If it works, it could be a groundbreaking new model for cable news. But if it fails, it could be a big setback for MSNBC.
Absolutely. And it's not just MSNBC that's experimenting with new formats. CNN recently launched a morning show with a similar ensemble setup, and other networks are probably watching closely to see how these experiments turn out.
It really does seem like the television news industry is at a crossroads. Declining viewership, the rise of streaming services, and the evolving political landscape are forcing these networks to rethink their strategies and adapt to a media environment that's changing so quickly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's not just about adapting to new technologies and platforms. It's also about realizing that viewers' expectations are changing too.
How so?
Well, with social media and online news sources, people are being bombarded with information from every direction. They're becoming more discerning, more demanding, and they're not content with just passively absorbing the news anymore. They want to be engaged, they want to interact, and they want to hear different perspectives.
It's like they're saying, don't just tell me what happened. Help me understand why it matters and what it means for me.
Exactly. And that's where traditional TV news often falls short. The format is inherently passive, with viewers sitting back and taking in whatever information they're being given. But in today's world, viewers want to be active participants in the news gathering process.
So what's the solution? How can TV news networks adapt to these changing expectations and stay relevant in a world where information is so readily available?
It's a tough question. There's no easy answer. But I think the key is to embrace innovation and be willing to experiment. They need to be willing to try new things, to step outside of their comfort zones, and to engage with their audiences in new and meaningful ways.
That sounds like a tall order.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific ideas about how they could do that?
Sure. For starters, they could incorporate more interactive elements into their programming. Things like live polls, Q&A sessions with experts, or even virtual town hall meetings where viewers can share their thoughts and opinions.
Those are great ideas.
Yeah.
It's all about creating a more dynamic and engaging experience for the viewer, making them feel like they're part of the conversation rather than just passive observers.
Exactly. And it's also about being more transparent and accessible. Instead of presenting themselves as all-knowing authorities, news organizations should be willing to acknowledge their biases and invite viewers to challenge their assumptions.
It's about building trust and credibility in a world where those things are becoming increasingly rare and valuable.
Absolutely. And it's also about recognizing that the future of news is not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in the past, TV news networks tried to appeal to everyone. They created programs that they thought would appeal to a mass audience. But in today's world, with so many different ways to get your news, that approach just doesn't work anymore.
So you're saying they need to embrace niche programming and create content that's tailored to specific interests and demographics.
Exactly. Instead of trying to be everything to everyone, they should focus on creating high-quality content that resonates with specific segments of the audience.
That's interesting. It's almost like they need to become more like streaming services, offering a variety of options that cater to different tastes and preferences.
Exactly. And they need to be willing to experiment with new formats and ways to deliver the news. Think about short videos for social media podcasts for people on the go, or even interactive documentaries that allow viewers to choose their own path.
It's about meeting viewers where they are instead of expecting them to come to you.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that the future of news isn't about broadcasting to a huge audience. It's about connecting with people on a more individual level.
This has been a really insightful conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, from Reid's departure to the challenges facing the television news industry as a whole. But before we get into the wider implications of these shakeups, I think we should take a closer look at Lester Holt's decision to step down from NBC Nightly News. What are your thoughts on his departure, and what does it tell us about the current state of network news?
That's a great point. Let's shift our focus to Lester Holt and his impressive run at NBC. His exit from Nightly News is a big moment in broadcast journalism. It really is the end of an era.
Absolutely. He's been such a fixture in the evening news for so long. It's hard to imagine it without him.
It really is. And his departure, along with all the other changes we've been discussing, brings up some interesting questions about the future of these long-standing news programs.
Like what?
Well, for example, are these nightly newscasts still relevant in a world where people can get their news instantly online and through social media?
That's a great question. And it's one that network executives are definitely wrestling with as they try to figure out how to navigate this evolving media landscape.
They're facing some tough decisions for sure. Do they try to stick with the traditional format and risk losing viewers to more modern and engaging platforms? Or do they try to reinvent the nightly newscast for a new generation?
It's a tricky balancing act, and there are no easy answers. But one thing is for sure, the television news industry is in a state of flux, and the next few years will be critical in shaping its future.
I agree. And it's not just about the networks themselves. It's also about the role of journalism in a democratic society. In a time when misinformation and disinformation are so prevalent, it's more important than ever to have reliable sources of news and information.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another crucial question. How can we ensure that journalism survives and thrives in this rapidly changing environment?
That's a question we could talk about for hours. But I think one key factor is going to be the ability of news organizations to adapt and innovate.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they need to find ways to connect with audiences in new and meaningful ways, to provide context and analysis that goes beyond just the headlines, and to build trust and credibility in a world where those qualities are becoming increasingly rare.
That's a tall order.
Yeah.
But it's also an exciting challenge. And I think journalists are up to it.
Yeah.
After all, we're storytellers at heart, and we're always searching for new ways to connect with our audiences and share the stories that matter.
Well said. And I think it's important to remember that the future of journalism isn't just about technology and platforms. It's about people. It's about the journalists who are out there every day doing the hard work of reporting the news and holding the powerful accountable.
Absolutely. And it's about the viewers, the listeners, and the readers who are hungry for information, for insights, and for stories that make them think and feel.
I couldn't have put it better myself. The future of journalism depends on a strong and healthy relationship between those who create the news and those who consume it.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's still so much more to explore. From the implications of these shakeups for MSNBC to the future of cable news as a whole, we have a lot more to unpack. But before we continue, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll delve even deeper into these issues and consider what it all means for the way we consume news and information in the digital age. So we were talking about the future of television news and how all these networks are trying to keep up with the changes in viewership and technology. It's a tough challenge for sure.
Yeah, it really is, like trying to hit a moving target.
And you mentioned that viewers these days are much more demanding. They want more than just the basic facts. They're looking for deeper analysis, different perspectives.
Yeah.
You think these changes at MSNBC are a sign that they're trying to meet those expectations?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. That move to replace one host with an ensemble show could be their way of providing a wider range of opinions and creating a more engaging experience for viewers.
That makes a lot of sense. It's
Yeah.
like they're realizing that one person can't possibly represent all the different viewpoints on an issue. By bringing in a diverse group of voices, they can have more nuanced and thought-provoking conversations.
Exactly. And it's not just about having different opinions, it's also about having different backgrounds and experiences. By showcasing people who haven't always had a platform in mainstream media, they can attract a wider audience and reflect the changing demographics of the country.
It's like they're saying, we're not just talking to one group anymore. We're talking to everyone.
Right. And I think that's a really important shift. In a world that's becoming more and more divided, it's crucial for news organizations to create spaces where people with different views can come together and have a respectful dialogue.
And that brings us back to this idea of news as entertainment. We talked earlier about the danger of blurring the lines between factual reporting and opinion-based commentary. Do you think there's a way to strike a balance between being informative and being entertaining?
I think there is. It's all about being transparent with your audience. Let them know what they're getting. If it's an opinion show, make it clear that it's opinion. Don't try to pass it off as objective news. And if it's straight news, make sure it's accurate, fair, and unbiased.
It's about being honest with your viewers and respecting their intelligence.
Yeah.
Don't talk down to them or try to manipulate them. Give them the facts and let them make up their own minds.
Exactly. And news doesn't have to be boring to be informative. There are ways to tell stories that are both compelling and accurate.
Absolutely. Look at documentaries, for example.
Yeah.
They can be incredibly informative and thought-provoking, but they're also often very entertaining and visually stunning.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
And there are other ways to make news more engaging, too. You can use graphics, animation, and interactive elements to tell stories in a visually appealing way. Or you can use humor and storytelling techniques to make complex topics more accessible to a wider audience.
It's all about finding creative ways to present information in a way that grabs people's attention and makes them want to learn more.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the presentation, is it? The content itself has to be strong.
Absolutely. The content needs to be relevant, timely, and meaningful to people's lives. It needs to address the issues that they care about and provide them with the information they need to make informed decisions.
So it's about finding the right balance between informing, engaging, and empowering your audience.
Exactly. And it's about realizing that the future of news isn't about broadcasting to a mass audience. It's about building relationships with individual viewers and creating a sense of community around shared interests and values.
It's about creating a place where people can come together to learn to share and to have meaningful conversations about the things that matter most to them.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
We've talked about a lot today, And it's clear that the world of television news is going through some major changes. The old ways of doing things aren't working anymore, and these networks have some big decisions to make as they try to keep up with the times.
That's true. But I think it's also a time of great opportunity. With all the new technologies and platforms, there are so many new ways to connect with people and share stories that matter.
It's an exciting time to be a journalist, and I'm optimistic about what the future holds. But it's going to take some creative thinking and a willingness to embrace change.
Definitely. And it's going to take a commitment to the core values of journalism, accuracy, fairness, independence, and a dedication to serving the public.
Those values have never been more important. So as we wrap up our deep dive this week, I want to leave you with this thought. The future of news isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we all create together.
That's a great point.
So be curious, be engaged, be part of the conversation. The future of news depends on it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get